The officer left black tankers in the rain. Then Patton saw 30 empty beds. December 1944, Eastern France. Rain hammered the roof of an American replacement barracks, while 30 black tankers stood outside in mud, clutching wet blankets and dented helmets. Inside, 30 clean bunks remained empty. A white quartermaster captain had forbidden the men to enter, even though they had driven through enemy fire for 2 nights, and one of them was bleeding through a bandage. His reason was simple. Those beds are not for colored troops. By sunset, a feverish soldier had collapsed beside the door. Then a jeep carrying General George S. Patton turned into the yard. What Patton did next silenced everyone inside. Before we get into what happened next, if you want more untold stories from World War II, hit that subscribe button. The men belonged to a black tank battalion attached to Patton's Third Army. For weeks they had hauled fuel, guarded roads, recovered damaged vehicles, and pushed armored columns through villages shattered by artillery. They were expected to fight like soldiers, repair like mechanics, and endure like mules. But when the shooting stopped, the army they served still separated them by race. Sergeant Elijah Carter had been awake for nearly 30 hours. A shell fragment had cut his shoulder during an ambush, but he refused evacuation because his crew's tank had thrown a track and blocked the road. He stayed under fire until the vehicle moved again. Only after the column reached the rear did a medic wrap the wound. Now Carter stood in freezing rain, watching water drip from the barracks roof onto his boots. Through the open doorway, he could see iron bedsteads, folded blankets, dry mattresses, and a pot-bellied stove glowing at the center of the room. A few white replacements played cards near the heat. They had arrived that morning. Most had never heard an enemy shell. Captain Warren Hale, the officer responsible for housing, stood beneath the awning wearing a dry overcoat and polished boots. Carter showed him the written assignment ordering the tankers into the barracks. Hale barely looked at it. "The other building is for your unit," he said. Carter glanced across the yard. The other building was a roofless storage shed with broken windows and puddles across the floor. "We have wounded men, Captain. You have a shelter. We have 30 empty beds right here." Hale's expression hardened. "Sergeant, I will not have trouble in my barracks. Take your men across the yard." Carter could have shouted. He could have threatened Hale with the names of officers who knew what his unit had done. Instead, he saluted, turned, and led his men toward the shed. They spread tarps over the wet floor and placed the sickest soldiers against the only wall that blocked the wind. Private Samuel Reed began shaking before dark. He was 19 years old and had driven an ammunition truck through a burning crossroads the night before. His uniform was still stained with smoke. By the time the medic reached him, his lips had turned pale and his fever was climbing. The medic returned to Hale and asked permission to move Reed beside the stove. Hale refused. "There are regulations," he said. "I am maintaining order." The medic stared at the empty bunks behind him. Those beds were issued to troops. They were issued to the proper troops. Hale believed the matter was finished. He believed rank protected him. He believed segregation was not cruelty if it was spoken calmly and written into routine. Most of all, he believed no general would concern himself with where 30 exhausted black soldiers slept. He was wrong. Patton had been traveling between supply points after complaints about fuel delays. His jeep entered the yard shortly after dusk. The rain had become sleet. As the vehicle slowed, Patton noticed men carrying a motionless soldier from the shed toward an ambulance. He looked at the barracks. Then he looked at the shed. "Why are those men over there?" he asked. A lieutenant beside him hesitated. "Housing assignment, sir." Patton's eyes narrowed. "Show me." The lieutenant led him into the shed. Water ran down the interior walls. Soldiers sat on ammunition crates with blankets over their shoulders. Carter stood when Patton entered, his wounded arm stiff against his side. Patton did not make a speech. He looked at the soaked uniforms, the muddy boots, and the empty space where Reed had been lying. "Who put you in here?" Carter paused. Complaining about a white officer could destroy a black sergeant's career, even during war. "I asked you a question," Patton said. "Captain Hale, sir." Patton turned toward the door. "Get him." Hale arrived 5 minutes later. He entered the shed with his cap tucked beneath one arm, annoyed until he saw the 4 stars on Patton's helmet. His face changed. The soldiers rose, but Patton motioned them down. "Did you assign these men to this building?" Patton asked. "Yes, sir." "Are there beds available in the barracks?" "Yes, sir, but how many?" Hale swallowed. 30, sir." Patton looked at Carter. "How many men in your group?" 30, General." The rain rattled against the broken roof. Patton faced Hale again. "Why are 30 soldiers lying in water while 30 beds are empty?" Hale tried to regain his confidence. "The barracks is designated for white personnel. I was following established practice." "Practice," Patton repeated. "Yes, sir. Mixing the men could damage discipline." Patton stepped closer. "These tankers crossed roads your supply officers were afraid to use. They kept ammunition moving while men were being killed for every mile. One of them has just gone to a hospital because you protected empty mattresses from American soldiers." Hale's jaw tightened. "General, I was preserving order." Patton pointed toward the flooded floor. "This is your order?" No one answered. Patton looked at the wet blankets, then at Hale's dry overcoat. His anger was visible but controlled. He could have struck the man. Men who knew Patton watched his hands. They knew what his temper had cost him before. But Patton did not touch him. Instead, he gave one command. "Move them in." Hale blinked. "Sir?" "All 30 into those beds tonight." Patton turned to the lieutenant. "Remove the white men from every bunk they are not using. No bed stays empty while a soldier sleeps in this filth." Then he faced Hale once more. "And since you believe this shed is suitable military housing, you will sleep here until I decide otherwise." The captain stopped breathing for a moment. "General, I am the housing officer." "Not anymore." The reversal began immediately. White soldiers gathered their gear without protest. Some looked ashamed. Others avoided the tanker's eyes. The stove was fed more coal. Wet jackets appeared on hooks. Medics placed clean bandages on Carter's shoulder and carried 2 feverish men into the warmest corner. Hale was ordered to surrender his office and report to division headquarters at dawn. Before leaving the barracks, he watched Carter place Reed's empty helmet on the bunk beside his own. Patton noticed it. "Will the boy live?" he asked. "The doctor says he should, sir." Patton nodded once. "Good." Then he looked around the room. "You men earned these beds. Don't thank me for giving soldiers what soldiers should already have." By midnight, Hale sat alone inside the storage shed, wearing the same dry overcoat in which he had denied shelter to others. Wind moved through the broken windows. Rainwater spread beneath his field cot. Guards posted outside were instructed not to mistreat him, but they were also instructed not to move him. The punishment lasted one night, not because one night equaled what the tankers had endured, but because Patton wanted the lesson understood before the paperwork began. The following morning, Hale was formally relieved of housing authority. An investigation found that he had ignored written accommodation orders and endangered sick and wounded personnel. He was transferred away from frontline support command. The Army did not suddenly become equal. Segregation remained. Prejudice remained. Many officers who shared Hale's beliefs were never confronted. But at that depot, the rules changed. An order went out that available shelter would be assigned according to military need, not race. Empty bunks could no longer be reserved while the combat troops slept outdoors. Black drivers, mechanics, and tank crews began receiving the same heated quarters when space existed. It was not justice everywhere. It was justice in one place where injustice had expected to survive. Private Reed recovered after several days in a field hospital. He returned to his unit before the winter ended. Years later, he told his children that he did not remember seeing Patton in the barracks. He had been unconscious by then. What he remembered was waking beneath a dry blanket and hearing Carter say, "A general finally looked through the right door." Carter survived the war. He rarely spoke about Hale. He spoke instead about the beds. 30 beds had stood empty. That was the whole crime. Not a battlefield mistake. Not a shortage. Not enemy action. Men had suffered because someone believed comfort belonged to one race and duty belonged to another. Hale called it discipline. Patton forced him to see it as cowardice protected by routine. The order did not erase segregation. It did not repair every insult those tankers had endured. But for one wet night in France, rank could not make cruelty respectable, and tradition could not turn empty beds into a defense. Was Patton's punishment too harsh? Or was one night in that flooded shed exactly what Captain Hale needed to understand? Let us know in the comments, and subscribe for more untold stories from World War II.